We have reached chapter 4 in the book of Daniel. Let's read verses 1 through 3. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language that live in all the earth, may your peace abound. It has seemed good to me to declare the signs and wonders which the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs, and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. The bullets read, apparently, a number of years transpired between the experience of Daniel's three friends in chapter 3 and the recording of the events in chapter 4. God had shown Nebuchadnezzar that he was able to deliver and preserve those who trust and obey him, but God's revelation of himself to the king did not conclude there, for God further revealed himself to the king through the circumstances recorded in chapter 4. In the king's proclamation to all the people of his empire, Nebuchadnezzar declared that God's miraculous signs he had learned of his power, and that the Most High God is sovereign and it exerts his will in his eternal kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar learned that it is God who rules according to his will and uses those he chooses as his instruments. And so here we see a second dream. We had one in chapter 2. Now in chapter 4, we have a second dream. Let's read about it. Verse 7, Nebuchadnezzar writes, I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream, and it made me fearful, and these fantasies as I lay on my bed and the visions in my mind kept alarming me. So I gave orders to bring into my presence all the wise men of Babylon, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Then the magicians, conjurers, the Chaldeans, and the diviners came in, and I related the dream to them, but they could not make its interpretation known to me. But finally Daniel came in before me, whose name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom is a spirit of the holy gods. And I related the dream to him, saying, O Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, since I know that a spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no mystery baffles you, tell me the visions of my dream which I have seen, along with its interpretation. The bullets read, For the second time a revelation was given to Nebuchadnezzar through a dream. This dream, like the one before, terrified the king. Though contented and prosperous, the king was afraid, so he sought an interpretation of the dream to allay his fears. Even though all the wise men of Babylon had been discredited previously because of their inability to interpret the first dream, counselors had been retained by the king. He summoned the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners in order for them to interpret the dream which he revealed to them. However, they were unable to do so. Then the king told the dream to Daniel. Let's read the explanation of the dream to Daniel by Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar writes, Now these were the visions in my mind as I lay on my bed. I was looking, and behold, there was a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew large and became strong, and its height reached to the sky, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. Its foliage was beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the sky dwelt in its branches, and all living creatures fed themselves from it. I was looking into visions in my mind as I lay on my bed, and behold, an angelic watcher, a holy one, descended from heaven. He shouted out and spoke as follows, Chop down the tree and cut off its branches, strip off its foliage and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it and the birds from its branches. yet leave the stump with its roots in the ground, but with a band of iron and bronze around it in the new grass of the field. And let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him share with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let a beast's mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him. This sentence is by the decree of the angelic watchers, and the decision is a command of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind, and bestows it on whom he wishes, and sets over it the lowliest of men. This is the dream which I, Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now you, Belteshazzar, tell me its interpretation, inasmuch as none of the wise men of my kingdom is able to make known to me the interpretation, but you are able, for a spirit of the holy gods is in you. Daniel was reluctant to interpret the dream. Let's read. Then Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar, was appalled for a while as his thoughts alarmed him. The king responded and said, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its interpretation alarm you. Belteshazzar replied, Oh, my lord, if only the dream applied to those who hate you, and its interpretation to your adversaries. The tree that you saw, which became large and grew strong, whose height reached to the sky and was visible to all the earth, and whose foliage was beautiful and its fruit abundant, and in which was food for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and whose branches the birds of the sky lodged, it is you, O king. For you have become great and grown strong, and your majesty has become great and reached to the sky, and your dominion to the end of the earth. Daniel had no reticence about interpreting the king's first dream. However, now he was reluctant to interpret the second one. The first dream exalted the king, but the second dream debased the king. When the king saw Daniel's reluctance, he encouraged him not to be alarmed, but to share its meaning with him. Daniel repeated the description of the greatness of the tree and then explained that the tree represented Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar had become great and strong, and his kingdom had been expanded and consolidated under his rule. His kingdom had become greater than any kingdom up to that point. Then we see the bad news. Verse 23 says, And that the king saw an angelic watcher, a holy one, descending from heaven, and saying, Chop down the tree and destroy it. Yet leave the stump with its roots in the ground, but with a band of iron and bronze around it, and the new grass of the field, and let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him share with the beasts of the field until 7 periods of time pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king, that you be driven away from mankind, and your dwelling place be with the beasts of the field, and you are to be given grass to eat like cattle, and be drenched with the dew of heaven, and 7 periods of time will pass over you until you recognize that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind and bestows it on whomever he wishes. The bullets tell us the cutting down of the tree, a decree from the Most High, meant that Nebuchadnezzar would be removed from his position of authority in the kingdom. He will be turned out of the palace and would live like an animal among the wild animals until 7 times, that is 7 years. In the mental illness known as zoanthropy, an illness observed in modern times, a person thinks of himself as an animal and acts like one. This may have been the disease the king had. Through the illness, Nebuchadnezzar would come to acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he wishes. We see in verse 26 the pride of the king, and in that it was commanded to leave the stump with the roots of the tree. Your kingdom will be assured to you after you recognize that it is heaven that rules. Therefore, O king, may my advice be pleasing to you. Break away now from your sins by doing righteousness, and from your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, in case there may be a prolonging of your prosperity. Let's read the bullets. The fact that the stump was not to be uprooted, but was to be secured and left in the field, indicates that the king would be restored to the throne. However, that restoration would not take place till Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged God's sovereign right to rule. And the second bullet tells us that Daniel concluded by exhorting the king to renounce his sins. This points out the principle that any announced judgment may be averted if there is repentance, such as Nineveh, as we studied in Jonah. Daniel urged Nebuchadnezzar to turn from his sinful pride and produce fruits of righteousness, acts which would stem from a heart that is submissive to God. Had Nebuchadnezzar done so, he would have averted his 7 years of insanity. We see the fulfillment of this dream. Let's read verses 28 through 33. All this happened to Nebuchadnezzar the king. 12 months later, he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. The king reflected and said, "Is this not Babylon the Great, which I myself have built as a royal residence by the might of my power and for the glory of my majesty?" While the word was in the king's mouth, a voice came from heaven saying, "King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is declared, sovereignty has been removed from you, and you will be driven away from mankind, and your dwelling place will be with the beasts of the field. You will be given grass to eat like cattle, and 7 periods of time will pass over until you recognize that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind and bestows it on whoever he wishes." Immediately the word concerning Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled, and he was driven away from mankind and began eating grass like cattle. And his body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair had grown like eagle's feathers and his nails like bird's claws. The revelation given to Nebuchadnezzar through Daniel's interpretation was soon forgotten, and Daniel's exhortation was ignored by the king. The king continued in his sinful pride. God endured Nebuchadnezzar's pride for 12 months. This may have been a period of grace. But when the king ignored Daniel's exhortation, God announced the interruption of his rule. As the king was boasting of his accomplishments while walking on the roof of his royal palace, a voice came from heaven announcing his judgment. But verse 34 tells us, "But at the end of that period, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my reason returned to me. And I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing. But he does according to his will in the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of earth, and no one can ward off his hand or say to him, 'What have you done?' At that time my reason returned to me, and my majesty and splendor were restored to me for the glory of my kingdom, and my counselors and my nobles began seeking me out, so I was reestablished in my sovereignty, and surpassing greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are true, and his ways just, and he is able to humble those who walk in pride." And let's look at the bullets. When the 7 years had transpired, Nebuchadnezzar, with his sanity restored, praised the Most High. A king who had sought honor and glory for himself now acknowledged that the Most High lives forever. The king confessed that God's dominion is eternal and that his kingdom endures. Thus Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged God's sovereign authority. The king's acknowledgement of God's right to rule brought about the restoration of the king's sanity and a restoration to his throne. I'm not sure if this is in or not.